Hello, welcome to the Pop Pod. I am Sam, also known as Pop Sam Cam, and this is a huge week for pop music. We have so much stuff being released this week. We have so much to celebrate as pop fans, so we're going to get straight into it. But if you like what you're listening to, hit follow or subscribe to the Pop Pod if you're not already. And if you have time to rate it 5 stars, that will be much appreciated. Really helps out with the visibility of this podcast. In the show description is the link to our Discord if you want to talk about pop music at length when new releases drop, when album anniversaries are celebrated. I recommend you come and join us there. We chat all the time about pop. Let's get into it. Starting off with the news, and Ethel Cain has announced the first single from her forthcoming album, Willoughby Tucker, I'll Always Love You. The song is called Nettles, and it's out on Wednesday, the 4th of June. The album is due to drop in August, but as of yet, we haven't heard anything from Ethel on it. Obviously, we got her project Perverts earlier in the year. I'm expecting that this one is going to be a lot more accessible than that record. However, it is Ethel Cain, so don't expect anything. Super excited to hear this one. This Friday is going to be quite a big day for pop music. We've got the Miley Cyrus album, Something Beautiful, coming out. She will also release Easy Lover as the single from that on Friday. But there is also plenty more stuff coming. We have Lorde's Man of the Year, which will probably be out now, depending on when you're listening to this podcast. Then on Friday, we have Haim coming through with the 4th single from their album, I Quit. It's called Take Me Back. And we also have Addison Rae's Fame is a Gun from her album Addison, which drops next week. That will also be out on Friday as well. And there's heaps of stuff. If you want to hear me run through it all with producer Jono on Friday, Bop or Flop episode will be out then. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you get an alert about that one. Finally, on the charts, it's good news for Lorde, but a song that is well over 10 years old. Ribs by Lorde has risen to number 142 on the global Spotify charts. That's up 12. With 1.358 million streams, this song has already debuted on the Billboard Hot 100, but just continues to gain steam and is looking like it could maybe be a bigger hit than anything on the album. I am very interested to hear that. Lorde threw a listening session for the album with fans in a bathroom in New Zealand, actually, at the YMCA in Auckland. She didn't reveal a lot about the record. Fans have remained pretty tight-lipped about it, but they did say that it is very good, and some of them said that it could be her best album yet. So I'm super excited to hear that one when it drops next month. It's good that we're talking about Lorde because she is the subject of the podcast today. In particular, her album Melodrama. This series that I do once a week basically covers the albums that I feel are integral to understanding where pop music has gone this millennium. I may even throw it further back later down the track, but we're focusing on this millennium for now. I've done Taylor Swift's Reputation. I've also done Charlie XCX's How I'm Feeling Now. It doesn't matter if they're big or small. It's just an album that I feel like shook the ground a little bit, and Melodrama by Lorde certainly shook the ground. It came out in 2017, 4 years after her breakthrough album, Pure Heroine. She was obviously only 16 when her song Royals took off. It went to number 1 in the US. It ended up winning a Grammy for Song and Record of the Year. Like, it's as big as you can get. So I guess the question was at that point, what is she going to do to follow it up? Is she just going to continue with this sound that she'd made? And the sound is so important because Lorde shifted the sound of pop significantly with Royals in particular.
And we'll never be royals. It's running our blood.
She changed the tempo. Lorde, instead of being like influenced by the big pop names like Gaga and Katy Perry, she was very influenced by hip hop work, particularly Kanye West. And that goes into creating this new hybrid of pop music, which is a lot darker, a lot more personal, and a lot slower than anything that was going on. It leads to artists like Billie Eilish coming through. It leads to artists like Ariana Grande doing a project like Thank You Next. It just totally changes the game. So Lorde, it comes to her second album. I can't imagine how hard it would be to start this process. You are in your teens, you're still growing up, you've had all these insane experiences that are just so unnatural and not normal for a child of that age. And yeah, I mean child, she basically was a child. She has this experience in New York, living there. She goes through a breakup, and all the while her brain chemistry is still kind of developing. And what I think is so interesting is that she gave herself the time to experience all those things before she let this album flood out of her. It's kind of unheard of to have a breakthrough at 16 years old and then be awarded 4 years to work on the follow-up for it. When you think of any child star, Miley Cyrus, Justin Bieber, Demi Lovato, all of them were given like a year to come through with a second album. So 4 years is a lot of time, but it's for the better because Melodrama explores very poignantly and very vividly what it feels like to be in your late teens, going through breakups, finding new friends, having new experiences for the first time, partying, wrecking your body, putting your body and mind back together. It just zeroes in on that perhaps better than any pop record ever. And I know that sounds melodramatic, excuse the pun, but it's true. There's very few albums that capture in real time that exact feeling. And I know it because so many people had the same experience that I did listening to it for the first time. And we're going to touch on all of that, speaking about Melodrama today. Let's talk about basically what's going on in the lead up to the release of Melodrama. So there's a lot going on in pop music, but pop music isn't really the same. It's not euphoric, bombastic pop. The charts are very dominated by hip hop. This is a big year for artists like Kendrick Lamar and Migos. It's also a big year for like post EDM acts like the Chainsmokers. We have Louis Fonsi, Justin Bieber, and Daddy Yankee coming through with Despacito, which is just like a globe-stopping hit. And we have Ed Sheeran's Shape of You, which is essentially like influenced by genres like reggaeton and also hip-hop, dancehall as well. So the sound of pop had definitely slowed down, but it feels like it had moved away from what Lorde had done with Royals. And Lorde releases the first single of this project, and it's pretty clear immediately that she just does not care.
I do my makeup in somebody else's car.
This first single, Greenlight, is a four to the floor, proper pop song, but it's a little bit strange. So I guess at this point, I'm not really considering Lorde in the lineage of artists like Robin, who were taking the pop blueprint and doing something quite different with it, but maximizing that emotional response. You hear that quite clearly on Dancing on My Own, which I will just bring up so many times throughout this series because it's so important to understanding the development of pop music over this period. But Greenlight very firmly starts to put Lorde in this conversation. She teams up with Jack Antonoff. Jack Antonoff at this point, 2017, he'd worked on Taylor Swift's Reputation quite heavily. He's on Out of the Woods with Taylor. He'd worked with Charlie XCX on Sucker as well. So he was very much in that kind of 80s tinged pop world and very used by now with Taylor to writing huge pop hits. But Greenlight is in many ways a huge pop hit. It's got those like euphoric keys. It's got that like chorus that is just an absolute release. It's got the outro that feels like it's just an exhale of all the emotion that you've just let in. It is a hugely resonant pop song and quite immediately as well. But dig a little deeper, and this song is quite strange in many ways. For starters, the intro is so stark. Her voice is so present. There's almost no instrumental behind her. And she just says,
She thinks you love the beach, you're such a damn liar.
Immediately, it feels so dark and so personal. We've been let into Lorde's world in a way that we had just not known before. Obviously, Pure Heroine was quite personal, but I never felt like we were this up close to Lorde, and it was clear that she had some shit to get off her chest. But what I immediately recognized with Greenlight is she's able to pair the heartbreak with the euphoria and realize that they're all part of the same thing, and also really realize the kind of catharsis that being on the dance floor can offer. And I think that's something that you start to understand, particularly if you grow up in your teens going to parties and kind of meeting people through that sort of way, that all the turmoil that's going on inside of you is so often dealt with in these really chaotic party situations. And a lot of that happens on the dance floor. There's nothing like going through like a really raucous night and then ending up on the dance floor and just like pouring your heart out by screaming to some song, whatever song. And I think that Greenlight captures that so well because it's a breakup song. It's a hard stop on a relationship, and the only way she figures out how she's going to move on is through that chorus that is just so danceable and so euphoric.
On the aisle, come get my things, but I can't let go. I'm waiting for it, that green light. Oh, I wish I could get my things and just let go.
I will talk a lot more about Greenlight as we go through this, because I asked for some of you to give me some questions, and a lot of them were about Greenlight and where I was when I first experienced it and what I think about it now. So we will go back to that. But Greenlight is this huge return from Lorde, but it doesn't exactly reflect that. It goes to number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100. It goes to number 4 in New Zealand and peaks at number 20 in the UK. This is good, but this is somebody who had broken through with one of the most impressive debuts of the millennium and was this act that everybody was counting on. And Greenlight just doesn't match what people thought it was going to do. And I think there are many reasons for this. The pop scene that Lorde had kind of created by slowing everything down was not ready for a song like this that was essentially at a much higher tempo. And it's funny that Lorde had almost ruins the atmosphere for herself to come through with something like that. The second part of it is I think it's just too upfront and in your face to work at radio, because it does just deal with things so heavily. And when you think of songs that really work on radio, they're these universal emotions that are almost like watered down, smoothed over. So kids in the car can enjoy it and parents in the car can enjoy it. This doesn't do that at all. And it doesn't feel like it's what Lorde wants to do, because she follows it up immediately, almost immediately, a couple weeks later, with a song called Liability, which is a ballad that, again, is just totally heartfelt. It's about feeling like you're too much for people and feeling like you need to isolate yourself because you don't want to face the embarrassment of, I guess, rejection and feeling like you don't belong in certain spaces. And this is something you feel so much as you're growing up, because you are put into so many spaces where you're meant to find your people, you're meant to make sense of who you are, and yet you have no fucking idea who you are. And I just love how Lorde portrays that. And I remember very specifically the Saturday Night Live performance where she's sitting at the piano next to Jack Antonoff, dressed basically like some kind of Catholic biblical creature. And it was so obvious the melodrama that she was bringing to this.
Baby really hurt me, crying in the taxi. He don't wanna know me, says he made the big mistake of dancing in my storm. Says it was poison.
She was bringing it to the performance, she was bringing it to the singing style, she was bringing it to the vocals, and she's talked about Liability since. And she said that a lot of people actually kind of looked at her with a little bit of worry after this song was written. But she said that it's not a thought that was long lasting, it was fleeting, but she's kind of captured it in this song that obviously lasts forever and makes people have some kind of concern for her. But I love that that's melodrama in a nutshell. Like these fleeting moments that she grabs and she makes them last. And I think you can never really understand your late teenage years / early 20s because everything seems to move so fast. It's almost a blur, particularly when you're experimenting with like drugs and drinking as well. It's all so, I don't know, everything's maximized and every emotion carries great weight to it. And you kind of are dumped out at the end of it with a much better idea of who you are, but being like, what the fuck was that? And melodrama is that space that you're not meant to understand, that blurry middle ground. it manages to solidify it and capture it so vividly. And it's just so hard to do. I mean, I can talk about my late teens and early 20s almost through the lens of this album because it helps me understand it a lot more than without having this to talk about it, which I just think is so cool. And I want to move to a lyric in Sober where she says, "We pretend that we just don't care, but we care."
We pretend that we just don't care, but we care.
She said in a podcast that I recommend that you actually go and listen to called Behind the Melodrama, where she discussed every song at length. She said this record is a document of that care. And I feel like that's a really beautiful way to put it because there's almost this cool that you have to carry in adolescence and you need to shrug off things so quickly, but you really do care. Like you feel emotions so in such a heightened way, but you also have to shrug them off so quickly. And I love that Melodrama leans into that. And I think it captures its best moments because it leans into that. It's this search for understanding. And I don't think, well, I think the end song is literally what the fuck are perfect places anyway. She searches for some understanding of what's going on. And in the end, she realizes that she actually has no idea. And this whole experience is just this search for euphoria and belonging that definitely happens at points, but is never long lasting. And this entire thing is like, this entire album is like MDMA. It's this like head rush of feeling and emotion and this absolute come down at the same time. And the fact that it's all centered around dealing with this breakup, I think, is so cool and so resonant to what so many people feel at that time. For me, this record kind of is broken into two. There's the partying and there is the come down. There's this really stark contrast or juxtaposition between euphoria and heartache and drama. And you can almost draw a line down the record of where it happens. You've got songs like Green Light, which find the euphoria. I think Homemade Dynamite does. I think even Sober does, even though it's much darker. Supercut, absolutely, in Perfect Places for sure.
But it's just a supercut of us. Supercut of us.
But then these moments of just like scary isolation almost. You asked if I was feeling it. I'm psycho high. No, you won't remember. In the morning when I speak my mind, she sings on Sober 2.
You asked if I was feeling it. I'm psycho high. No, you won't remember in the morning when I speak my mind.
And I feel like that is just so apt for this. She sings in the same song, "We told you this was melodrama. Oh, how fast the evening passes, cleaning up the champagne glasses." And that's exactly the flip side of it. As quickly as you come up, you come down. And that is the harsh reality of Melodrama in a nutshell.
Oh, how fast the evening passes, cleaning up the champagne glasses.
What I also love about this record is her connection to places, to physical places. I particularly like In Riding in the Dark, which I think is just an incredible ballad because it encapsulates melodrama as a whole. It's the most melodramatic she is, both in the tone of her voice and the tone of her lyrics. It's so over the top, but so brilliant. And I love how she sings specifically about being in New York post-breakup and sings,
I ride the subway, read the signs, I let the seasons change my minds. I love it here since I stopped needing you.
I think the backdrop of New York is so perfect to this because there's a grittiness, but there's also a like neon lit beauty in the nightlife of New York and the experiences you have in the night here that really contrast with that grittiness. I know, like, I just think that New York is such a nighttime city. And if you've ever kind of walked around the city at like 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, it's so barren and it's so weird to be here when there's nobody else around, when at 4 a.m. in the morning, the night before, you were kind of surrounded by people. And I love that contrast in this album between the loneliness of being in New York during the day and the absolute euphoria and just like crowdedness of being in New York by night. I think that that's a really cool and important part of this record as well. As much as Euphoria is explored on this album through these grand like dance floor party feelings, it's also about letting go of something, and in Lorde's case it's about letting go of this relationship. And I think the biggest moment of Euphoria comes on this record during Supercut, where it feels like she's finally captured the emotion, exactly what she's feeling about this breakup, and is able to express it and then exhale. And in the podcast Behind the Melodrama, she also talks about that. And she said, I could cry because it's such a relief getting out how you feel for the first time. And Supercut is exactly that. And I think the hardest thing as a songwriter and producer is to capture that momentary feeling and make it last forever, and then retain it as you produce the song, as you continue to work on it, as the song like takes on a life of its own. But that's exactly what Supercut does. It plays exactly like a coming of age film, and the reel of their relationship almost plays in your mind until it fades. And Jack Antonoff's production across this whole record is spectacular, and particularly in that moment, how it begins to fade and it just kind of fizzles out. Suddenly it's gone, and then we move into the final song, the penultimate song, which is Liability Reprise. And I've done a lot of reading about this album in preparation for this podcast, and she talks about how she thought she had a very clear vision of who she was going into this album. And I think that is so like typical of someone when they're like 16, particularly when you've come to define a movement of pop and you've become famous. It's like you feel like you are so steadfast and so confident in who you are. And then over the next few years, that is just completely blown open. And she almost sings to herself in this song, "You're not who you thought you were."
But you're not what you thought you were.
Which I think is such a cool realization. And then to go from that into Perfect Places, which is another realization of sorts that's just like, we're all searching for something and we're all using different methods to get there, to kind of capture this high and capture this excitement and capture this like love and lust for life. And sometimes it doesn't last, and we're probably never going to end at the end point where we have that forever. But that's okay. Like, let's enjoy it for now. I think that Perfect Places is such a stunning finale to this record. I actually want to talk more about Jack and Lorde's partnership, because I think that it's so integral to understanding this project. And she said at the time that she was feeling extremely lonely. She kind of didn't want to be alone by herself in like Airbnbs in New York or at the studio. And she did a lot of writing for this record at Jack's kitchen table. And I think that what Jack is so good at is making people feel totally comfortable and creating an environment where they really set the tone of the record, and he just sort of colors in certain aspects of it. I think it was clear that the two of them had so much inspiration during this time, and also such a willingness to go to different places, whether it be that like Bruce Springsteen-esque outro of the Louvre, there's just so many moments that feel cinematic and totally born from a place of like artistic inspiration and like cohesion between the two of them. And that is just so rare to get. I think that you can get a good record out of an artist and producer who are getting along, but I think you can get a like phenomenal album out of an artist and producer that just feel like totally merged in some kind of way. And I love that there are obviously so many production points on this album that point so heavily to Jack, but Lorde's voice is so undiluted that it's so clearly a Lorde record. And I feel like that's so rare to see in a partnership that is that fruitful that it does feel so Lorde and it doesn't feel like Jack's voice is coming through at all. And that's testament to his ability to create such a comforting environment in the whole thing. Let's talk about how it did on the charts, because like Greenlight, it didn't exactly set it on fire, even though it did debut at number 1 in the US, selling 100,000 units, but it quickly dropped and I don't think is known as kind of a commercial blockbuster, I suppose, and certainly not the one that Pure Heroin was. It got extremely good reviews. Almost every publication has noted that Melodrama is one of the best albums of the 2010s, sorry. And I think it's pretty obvious that this is Lorde's best received album from a critical point of view. It ends up going on to be nominated for Album of the Year at the Grammys. That's the only category that it's nominated on, and it eventually loses that award. But I think the fact that it was nominated at all is pretty cool, given that Pure Heroin was never given that honor. Okay, what I want to do is answer a bunch of questions, because you've asked some questions on my Instagram. And if you're not already following my Instagram, head there, because I will often ask for suggestions of what to talk about on the podcast or what questions I need to answer. I've cherry picked a few of them and I'm going to answer them now. The first one, and actually one that came up quite a few times, is why isn't Hard Feelings / Loveless separate songs? I actually listened to Lorde talk about this on the Behind the Melodrama podcast, to shout it out once more. But she was actually inspired by Kanye West's Famous, which is the song that features Rihanna on The Life of Pablo and infamously calls Taylor Swift the B word. And while we can probably look back on that with a bit of a frown, the song switches up quite starkly at the end and goes into that sample of
We never gonna die.
I just wanted you to know.
And Lorde was inspired by that in having such a contrast between the two vibes of the song. And she had this song Loveless that she really liked.
Bet you wanna rip my heart out. Bet you wanna skip my calls now. Guess what? I like that.
And she really liked it because it had such a light tone to it, but it's almost like evil in the things that it's talking about. It's saying like, if you want to play games with me and not answer my calls, like, watch out, because I'm about to level up. And that is growing up anyway, because it's all a bunch of games that you play like with lovers and with friends and everything. Like there are so many games going on at that point, but there's something so innocent about the beat of it. And then it's paired with Hard Feelings, which is one of the most emotionally dense songs on the record. And I really like how you are forced to consider the two as a singular piece, even though that they are so different, because she believed that Loveless couldn't live on its own. But by living with Hard Feelings, I think it juxtaposes exactly what I've been talking about with this whole album, is that it's about having these emotionally dense times, but then just being able to flick a switch and go into a mode that's so different. And I think that is like that is growing up, basically. That is what you have to face, is these like complete mood swings that just make absolutely no sense. And that is Hard Feelings and Loveless in a song. I personally love that they are paired. I got the vibe from what a lot of people were saying on my Instagram that you don't love it, but I think that it makes such a centerpiece for the album. The next question is, where were you in life when this came out? I was obviously a little bit older than Lorde. I was in my mid-20s. And I was living in Sydney, going out a lot, experiencing the nightlife. I was meeting a lot of new friends. I'd finally found a career path that was working for me, had started to work in music. And I think because of that, I kind of understand this project in a way, because I was figuring out that I was not figuring out so much, but really realizing that a lot of the friends I'd made at school were not exactly the friends that represented my personality the best. And I was making these new friends within music that just was so exciting to me. And if they're listening, shout out, because I'm still friends with them. But I don't know. It felt like I was taking on a whole new persona. And Melodrama made so much sense to me because Melodrama is like a shedding of skin. It's like beginning a new life as a different person. And this just hit me so heavy. I remember listening to it for the first time and like just feeling goosebumps over my entire body at many of the moments because I'd never felt it described so beautifully and just so like aptly, and it resonated with me immediately and so quickly. And this is coming from somebody who wasn't the biggest Lorde fan on earth. I like Pure Heroine, but I'm not crazy about it. But it just caught me at such a perfect moment, and I just absolutely loved it and still do love it. I mean, it still takes me back to that time in my mind. The next thing is any important memories for a song. I guess I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess my thing is like with Greenlight in particular, that was a song that I remember hearing in the clubs the first couple weeks that it had come out. And I remember people like kind of enjoying it because it was a Lorde song and we were excited to have her back. But it wasn't like giving me the exhale that I really wanted from it, given that when I'd listened to the record for the first time, it had made me so excited. And given that it's been like, 8 years almost since that album was released, it has taken on such a different life. And I think it's because Lorde has become such a cult figure within pop music. And I guess that's something that I haven't really talked about enough, is how Melodrama did reposition her as kind of like a Charlie Robbins sort of figure. But since it's been played, and I just played it a couple of weeks ago when I was DJing, and it was literally the highlight of the night. Like, people love this song and they just like scream this song at the top of their lungs now. And I think that that's so cool that it has had that development where it is now a classic, even though it wasn't a hit at the time. So I guess that's not really like a memory attached to it, but yeah, I absolutely love it. What should have been the singles run? I think by and large, she got the singles run pretty correct. I think putting Liability in maybe stunted things a little bit, but I understand that she wanted to give that song a moment because it's so special. But I think if she'd maybe gone with Greenlight is the perfect lead single and it couldn't have been anything else, maybe followed that up directly with Perfect Places and then followed it up with Homemade Dynamite, like that is a trio that I absolutely love together and I think makes perfect sense. The crazy thing is that Homemade Dynamite actually was a single, but it was stunted because it was going to be released I think just after the Manchester bombings happened at the Ariana Grande concert, and they felt that it was insensitive to release a song like Homemade Dynamite, which is completely true. But I do think that Homemade Dynamite potentially had the most hit potential on Melodrama in general. I think that leads us quite nicely into the next question, which is Homemade Dynamite original or remix. I remember thinking the remix was so genius because there were like 3 artists popping off at that time, and it was Post Malone, Khalid, and SZA, and she got all 3 of them on the remix for Homemade Dynamite. I don't think the remix should live on the original Melodrama, but I literally love that remix so much, and SZA's verse I just replayed on repeat. I think that it is so cool. So I actually still listen to the remix of Homemade Dynamite, to be honest.
I checked your girl at the door. I sent your friend to the store. It's only me and you. Finally used you and I don't regret drinking this liquor.
Do you think Melodrama will stand the test of time? I mean, it already has stood the test of time. It's been 8 years since Melodrama was released. People are still talking about it. It's going to be the record that Lorde kind of can't escape. I think even with the release of Virgin, which comes 2 albums after Melodrama, people are still bringing it up. And I think the reason why it is going to last for so long, because I think why Pure Heroine really dictated and influenced the sound of pop for records to come, Melodrama didn't try to do that and hasn't really done that. I can definitely hear elements of it in work by like Olivia Rodrigo and Billie Eilish, but I don't really think that it has like changed the sound of pop in a huge way. And I really like that. And I think because it's so singular to Lorde, and when you think about some of the most game-changing pop records through time, whether it be Bowie or Madonna or even Gaga, no one's ever been quite able to recreate that sound because it is so singular, and the voice in the middle of it is just so present and just so unerasable, if that's a word. But that's exactly what I think about Melodrama. It's so uniquely Lorde that you just can't replicate it. You can't copy it. And I think that's the reason why it's going to last a very long time. It also has shown that it stood the test of time because it showed up on everybody's best of the millennium lists or best of the decade lists. So people remember Melodrama no matter what. And I think we're still going to be speaking about it very positively. How do you explain it to deniers? I've thought about this quite a lot. And I think if you deny Melodrama, you just had a different late teens / early 20s experience. This is a record for people who partied their way through it, had complicated relationships in and out of the club, went through a breakup, changed shapes a lot. Like, I think this is a record for people who really were not themselves as they were growing up in school and found themselves in their early kind of 20s. And if you don't really get it, you don't get it. And that's fine. You had a different experience. And I think you probably resonate with a different sort of record. But if you did have this experience, I'd be very surprised if you are not a Melodrama head. Those are the questions that have been asked. Thank you so much for asking them. And thank you for joining me to talk about one of my favorite pop records of all time. If you've got any suggestions of what I should do next, please DM me, join the Discord, find me wherever you can and let me know what you want to hear. Otherwise, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, rate it 5 stars, join the Discord. I will see you tomorrow with producer Jono for Bop or Flop. Thanks for joining.